man.
Hey.
Hey. Here we go.
Yeah, what is it? God, it's the 11th already. Yeah, that's going to remind everybody, right? We're here December 11th, 2025. Again, from Crushing Iron Podcast, episode 896. I just want to remind everybody that a few weeks ago, I told you Thanksgiving was the greatest holiday. So when I read all the training piece comments about how stressful Christmas and holiday time is, I just want you to rewind for a little bit and remind yourself that a few weeks ago, we had all the greatness that is of a holiday. Food, family, fun, football, and zero stress. You're not getting your kids' teachers presents for Thanksgiving. You're not getting cousins and aunts and step-laws and whoever else presents because you feel like you have to, because if you show up to the family gathering and they got you something and you didn't get them something, then you look like the asshole. Like, none of that happened in November. Everybody was happy. Everybody was stress-free. Everybody's enjoying life. You don't have office parties you got to go to. You don't have, 18 different family things you go to. You don't have to worry about going to the grocery store when people are there looking for an assault charge with the way that they handle the grocery carts and then the parking situation. I'm just telling you, this is just a quick reminder for all of you that told me a few weeks ago that Thanksgiving was not a great holiday. I feel you slowly coming on board, and I'm here for it. You can slide into my DMs whenever you want to and apologize. Thanksgiving, superior, and by the end of, my time in those podcasts, I think I'll have brought at least 13 people over to my side.
C26 is in the house.
Oh, was that your boy Mike Riley?
Yeah, it was. I think
the
so.
The voice, Mike Riley. Yeah, I mean, God, what race was that?
I have no idea. I just have it saved in my sound effects bank.
That's hilarious.
I
got all this stuff. Like Hayden got his first shout out before I even got a shout out from Mike Riley back when you and I did Wisconsin together 10 years ago. And he was there at the finish line with his little earphones on, covering it up. Man, those are the days. Yeah, that's hilarious. I bet Mike Riley's a Christmas guy, for sure. He's definitely not a Thanksgiving guy. I bet he's a Christmas guy. Oh man, no, good to be
Sell
here.
Sell more books that way.
That's right, man. You got to go by the voice. More about the books. Yeah, happy to be here always. As our second podcast of the week. Again, it's December 11th. It's 2025 still. And yes, welcome back aboard to the Crushing Iron Podcast. We're here, episode 896. Busy weekend coming up to an extent, right? You still got, I think, a Florida 70.3. You got the T100 race. But outside of that, it's like the official shutting of the door of the season. People get a little bit of a break going in the off season, quote unquote, if they're not already taking it. We're obviously embracing December rules to the fullest extent on our team, which is, again, it's something that we created, back in, I think, 5 years ago, back in 2020, and has been like a staple, something that people look forward to. But also, some people will readily admit, I took October and November rules, so there's no need to take December rules. And that especially true this coming year. As we were talking before we went live, I actually wanted to ask you a few questions about cold water stuff, but the earliest 70.3s this year are all bumped up. So you got Dallas 70.3, which I've signed up for, which is in mid-March.
Yeah.
That's early. I mean, it's not far. I mean, and I'm reminded of this every single day. It is not far away. And then you got Texas 70.3 and Oceanside 70.3, which have usually been the two races on the North American calendar, which have kind of been the official kickoff. Those have been back-ended into March as well. I mean, so you're thinking, again, in April, Ironman Texas 2 is, I think, at least a week back. I think it's on the 18th of April. It's like the calendar continues to extend and get longer, and just like they're doing for professional sports, right? They're making these seasons longer. You got a postseason. If you're an athlete that, I always find it interesting, the teams that repeat or are continuously in the postseason. I think I was reading a stat for NHL, Major League Baseball, maybe not Major League Baseball, but football and NHL. in basketball, like if you make it far in the postseason for like 2 or 3 years in a row, it's like playing a whole nother season.
Yeah, that's nuts, man.
Which is just wild, right? And I also think like when athletes, and this isn't where I wanted to go with the podcast, but I think it's interesting, is, I think athletes don't think of that either, because we only think about seasons, right? We don't think about, what do we do in each season? You're not talking about like how the length of the season. You got athletes that, maybe you're an athlete doing Dallas 70.3, and that race is sold out. I bet you it's got a ton of people because it's in Texas, an early season race. You don't have to travel for it, because usually if you wanted to go that early, you're heading down to Puerto Rico to do that race. But you got March, and let's say you're eyeballing like a late season October and November race. Like, I think, the importance of the off season and taking downtime is so important. And then if you don't, and you continually have these really, really long years with an early start to the season or no time off, you're looking at just like continuous season over and over again. You don't have like the time to, to rejuvenate, to, take care of yourself mentally, emotionally, let your body heal up. I mean, it's like you look at the marathon majors and the top tier marathon runners across the world. They're good for like 3 a year. That's it. They're good for like, that 3 a year is about all they'll do. But you got Ironman athletes who are out there doing like 3 or 4 fulls a year on top of 70.3s, on top of training. And they come back around, they're starting the year off in March. I mean, Dallas 70.3 is one of the Ironman Pro Series races. I mean, not Pro Series, but like it's going to offer a pro prize purse. And I can't help but think, back when we started in the sport, it's how more condensed the year was, and it allowed more time. I think the professionals obviously, feel more pressure than ever with the added opportunities they have to make money, between the T100 and the Ironman Pro Series, how it's like how much it's shortening their careers. Like back, 5, 6, 7 years ago, you're looking at Ironman champions in like their mid to late 30s, like that was what you saw. And now I don't think you're going to see it anymore, because I think they're going to be so roasted from just like going end to end every year and not feeling like they can take a downtime, either because, they see the financial reward with these late season races. I mean, you got the T100 Qatar this weekend. It's like, dude, it's Christmas. And then their first one again is in like, I think March in Singapore. I mean, and Ironman's no different with their calendar. So I just can't help but think how like career shortening so many of these events are. And age groupers do the same thing themselves. Like they complain and they moan about, being stagnant and not seeing improvement, but there are, a lot of them the same way. Like they're not taking time off. They're doing the same distance races. They're not taking time to go shorter. And I just think it's something that, we all need to remember going into the year, is like that time off is great. And that's also the huge level of importance of having, not just by label, but actually having A, B, C races, not A race, A race, A race, because then you just train the whole way through and you end up plateauing because your body needs different stimulus to get better. And I think it just, to get better right now it takes a lot of patience. You got to ignore the FOMO. And you got to pick your race calendar carefully, and also just know that, if you've got an A race and it's not till September or October, you can't train the same way from February till then. Like you got to extend things out and just know that, and then, prepare yourself and have patience, trust the process, and then just be ready to show up when you want to in, August, September, October.
Yeah, the days of guys showing up at spring training with beer bellies are long gone. I just remember growing up, and these guys, they'd work their way into shape during spring training, but now they're already at peak form or whatever. You mentioned December rules, and I kind of like to think of that as life rules, and a little bit more than just, I don't know, man. We were talking about last time is like having the bandwidth to keep going, and I mentioned Art Bell and the quickening and everything. It just seems like, what are we doing sometimes? Just you said 10 years ago about that race earlier, and I was like, wow, where did that go, man? That just seems like it was yesterday, and it really does kind of.
But still, feels like 20.
Yeah. Feels like 20, and it feels like yesterday, because it's just like sometimes, like I said, you kind of get caught up in these I guess I call them the triathlon life cycle or something, and you never get out of it. But man, it can just, it is one of those things where you really need to kind of step back and look around a little bit sometimes, because before you know it, you're just back in it. And I don't know, man. It's pretty crazy how that, because I mean, I mentioned baseball, but now they're doing like those international leagues, and they're playing year round. It's kind of crazy, man.
Well, I mean, it's no different, right? In triathlon, and I mean, at the age groupers, it's for a different motivation, right? In professional sports, it's about money, right? Like, it's about, you extend the season. When I mean, money, you extend extra regular season
money
and exactly NFL games. It's all about money, right? And for pro triathletes, it's all about money and opportunity. But for age group athletes, it's all about, feeling like you're missing out. And, again, like if you've got the mindset, right, that you want to go and just do these races and have fun, that's fine, but just go and honestly, just like go through the motions, but don't. But I think that's the hardest thing for triathletes, right? Because they're type A, not all, but a lot of them are type A perfectionists. They always want to do better. They might tell you, right, as a coach, hey, I'm good training through this race and not do anything, and then you do that, and then they're disappointed that they didn't knock it out of the park. Like when you're setting up, and I know we talked a little bit about this on the podcast Tuesday, and how looking backwards at why you picked races. But if you're looking at a calendar, right, and you really want to do well with it, you've got to look at your year honestly through like a couple different magnifying glasses. And be very, very objective, and also like not be stuck to and married to like a specific, periodization or base build peak model. And that's something that we've talked about a lot the last couple of years. I think 3 or 4 years ago, we talked about how I thought general periodization was insanely overrated for age group athletes because of the nature of their life. Right. It's just different all the time. Right. So like if you looked at, and I think that's, it's, again, is it easy to plan that way? Sure. And do most training plans people buy? And that's my issue is like, you buy a training plan, which a lot of people work off of, or you want to be, extra, even more low budget and hop on Gemini or Chat GPT and, tell them to write your race calendar. Well, they're going to use the same basic principles that are out there, right? If they just search the internet, like, I'm going to do a base build and peak model. Well, here's the thing is like, what if you have, what if the majority of your time is in a different spot? Like, most people would argue, like, if you look at a base build peak volume wise, like if you're looking at the course of your year, when is the most amount of time you're going to have? Like, I'll use myself an example. So the best time of year for me to do high volume is during the school year. Right. So all the way from now until April, right, is the best time of year for me to do higher volume, or not April, but, May. I mean, who knows with our school district? They might be at a school in February, so who knows? But the point is like during the school year is the best opportunity for me to get highest volume. Life-wise, it's easy. And then also professionally, it's easy because up until May, there's very few races going on, and it just makes life. We don't have as many camps. It just makes life a lot easier. But what if I'm doing Dallas 70.3 in March, and then what if I'm scheduled to do Ironman Wisconsin in September? Well, if you wanted to really think through that, you might think, oh, well, you want to do the most amount of your volume in that like June, July, August time frame. But for me, that's the worst time of year for me. Professionally, it's the busiest time of year. I have less available time. And also from a home standpoint, it is the hardest time of year to do it because Hayden has more demands. He's doing more things. He got just as many activities. And there isn't that like set structure of Monday through Friday school, which again has its own challenges, but at least from 8:20 to 3:50 Monday through Friday, there is a set schedule. And so if you're that athlete and you're me, that's not going to happen, right? But most time you look at these training plans or anything else, like they're going to tell you, obviously your peak hours are going to need to be like those last few months. Well, for a guy like me, that's not possible. So you might want to front load December, January, February, March, April, May, get your highest amount of volume in, and then just be ready to do, a lot less volume, maybe even up to like 50 to 60% of what you were doing before, and just make it intensity, right? And that's why, again, like that's not a traditional periodized model, but that's why you have to be, I think, very flexible in what you need, but also the fact that it's just not, what we do in life. And if you're married, you have kids, you have a job, like a lot of what we do is just very unpredictable, and so if you have these phases that are pre-built in, you can't always be married to those. And so I think we even have a podcast thing where we kind of talked about always doing something in some of the, the 5 models every like block, so like one of the things I've been toying with is like making sure that I'm hitting everything every 3 weeks. Like for week 1, I might do VO2 work. Week 2, I might do threshold work. Week 3, I might do longer tempo work, and then I recover. Like, oh, you're doing too much. You can't. Like, well, I want to make sure I'm getting good at everything, because what I also don't want to do is just spend a whole lot of time in this one segment, and then something come up in life, or I have to travel more, I have to do more stuff, and then I've like forced into like skipping a very crucial part of it. So I think, like, again, looking at your calendar, you also have to look at your races and how they fit into life. And I think like if you do like a color scheme, right, you got January, you put. That's what I honestly think most people should do before they plan out their race calendars. You take, top of a spreadsheet. I'm a spreadsheet guy. Top of January, is your, and then roll all the way through December, the top of the column, and then just color code it, right? Color code the green, like block it out and fill those cells with green as your high volume months. Life is the easiest. Color code yellow is like, not as much. Than color code red, as in, the months that are the hardest to get any volume in. And then look at the race calendar and think what might fit. And if there isn't anything that fits perfectly, because honestly, to tell you the truth, most don't, right? I mean, most people will tell you that I had this conversation with an athlete earlier this week who basically just does Ironman Wisconsin every year. Sound familiar? And he was like, hey, bad news. My best friend's getting married on that day, and I can't do it. And he was like, so I'm thinking about Ironman Texas. It's like the polar opposite event, right? Same distance, completely different. And this guy lives in Minnesota. So it's not like he's, it's like Wisconsin, late in the season, you got plenty of time. You got plenty of time to outdoor ride and do all these things. But he was like, but on the other hand, like the school year provides, he's got like I think a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. He's like, but the school year does provide like a lot of opportunity to get all my stuff done in like Monday through Friday. And do I want to be stuck on the trainer? No, but I can do that. So again, like when you're looking at, and again, whether you've committed to a race or you're not committed to a race, you're thinking about through your calendar, like think about those ebbs and flows. And again, like just don't be so married to, certain things. As I was listening to, I'm being super chatty today, sorry, I was listening to this guy talk earlier this week, and he talked about what he considered like wave periodization, meaning, you're always doing something. So you got the cycles of the waves. And so like one part of the periodization where you're focusing on, VO2 max might be at the crest. And then as you kind of go down, you're still doing it. You're doing less of it. Now you're doing more of something else. And so it like all slowly blends into something. But then if you see a person, because this is my biggest thing, and it's always been my biggest issue with periodization. And he said the same thing was, if something's working well, why would we stop and move to something else? And that's like, you have probably the same conversation I do with newer athletes when they're like, hey, all right, so what are going to be our blocks? When is the build phase going to start? And I was like, I have no idea. Because if you're doing whatever work we're doing, whether it's a VO2 max block, a threshold block, long tempo, strength, muscular endurance, whatever it is, if it's working and you're getting fitter and you're becoming more efficient and you're becoming more economical, why would we just change to change? Why would we just say, oh, sorry, man. I know. Listen, Mike, I know we are seeing huge gains in the muscular endurance and strength department. Your heart rate's coming down. Your pace getting better. Like this is crushing it. You're also loving the training. I know this is all going great, but I got to break it to you. On December, 31st, I'm sorry, we have to stop doing all of it because, the mesocycle that we're in says we have to start the build phase. And you're like, why would you ever do that? And no one can tell you. There's no reason to do that. To just stop something that works. You only stop doing something if it starts to not work anymore, or you start to stall out. It'd be like if you're on a eating regime that works well and you're losing weight and losing body fat, and you feel great and you have more energy and you're sleeping awesome, but the book was like, all right, you know what? It's time to shift to this. You'd be like, no, I'm not shifting like this. I have found my jam. Like, you wouldn't do it. But yet we feel this need in training to like plan out these specific cycles. Again, I think it creates more comfort for athletes, but it honestly, when you look at it and what happens when you do it is it creates more chaos because your body's like, whoa. Like, this was amazing. Why are we stopping? Because then you went from not a stress-free, right? Because training is still stress, but a absorbable stress that was complementary to the body to now going through a totally different stress that will overstress the body because it's new, just like a new diet, right? You're stressing the body in a different way. There's just no need to change. And I think that this, again, like I know it's a lot to like consume and maybe hasn't been like super focused and thought, but these just all these things that as a coach, and I know athletes think about this time of year and wanting like these set perfect start dates and end dates because I think it helps them create comfort and stability. But nothing we have in life is super comfortable and super stable. If you have that, congrats. Like you found like, the happy, like you're in a great spot. But for most people, their life is, occasionally very uncomfortable and anything but stable. You're at the mercy of your kids and your job and travel and your spouse and your in-laws or your parents and their declining health or your kids and, and their issues. Like, you don't have that. So planning to have that and planning your training around that, I think, is just creating false hope and a poor plan. I'm done.
Oh, yeah, so it's okay, man. I was just building a spreadsheet around everything you're saying. I was just trying to organize that shit, man. It is all over the place. It's got those arrows up into the thought bubbles. But honestly, man, yeah, I mean, it's also, like, kind of for me, I know you have more time in the early year and now, but I like, it's hard for me. Time of year is huge for me too, because for whatever reason, that when it gets warm, and I think that's not uncommon, that people feel like doing more work. It's just more, there's more drive and motivation, I guess, during the summer. So I have never been able to, because I've always had this thing about doing Texas. Like, I want to go do Texas, get it out of the way, do that kind of thing. And I'm like, shit, for me to swim in the winter up here and get on the trainer and stuff like that. It's yeah, there's time there, but I just don't have the juice sometimes to, I guess, get it out there. And, but you're talking about like how, I mean, athletes got to figure out too what they want, and know what they want as far as the race goes. Cause we can be doing exactly what you're saying, and then suddenly out of nowhere, they kind of just hit a 2-week lull or whatever, and then we're behind the 8 ball, and it's just sort of like kind of making it come together kind of thing more than really a succinct plan all the time. And it's a lot of times just a lot of athletes are kind of like that. It's like they're on a really good groove, and then stuff happens in life and things kind of fall apart. So it's an adjustment, and I think in a perfect world, I guess I've never been great about being perfect. You know what I mean? It's sort of like I could lay it all out and then hope to hit it. I think some people are definitely like that. But it's I don't know. It's just a weird process sometimes to go through a year like that and have it all laid out and adjust, like you mentioned, AI and all that kind of thing, because it's sort of like, just having a training plan, I guess, is sort of like, that's so many people get in trouble with that because it just starts snowballing, and then the next thing you know, it turns into like an injury or something like that and whatever. But I was just trying to follow what you're saying there. I'm just going like, trying to pick a certain topic out of there to kind of roll with.
Well, there's almost too many topics, but I mean, like going back to, I think something you mentioned, like outside of like the availability, from a time standpoint, because again, that's also fleeting. And also, I mean, and here's also the piece that I think, like I've come to understand, and I think, people with kids or, blossoming and busy social lives, whether you have kids or not, like just because you have time available doesn't mean you want to use it to train. And I think that is, and I mean, that's something that I've, like wrestled with a lot the last few years, is like, as Hayden's kind of hit this like sweet spot where, we do a lot of stuff together and it's fun. And he's like, a best little buddy, and like, you don't want to miss those times. So like, just because you have this like 6-7 month spot of green in your, your hypothetical spreadsheet doesn't mean you have to allocate all that to training, and you might not want to. And that's also perfectly okay. And I think like, and again, like, I think that's why most people will be so much better suited just trying to train and focusing on doing a 70.3 than training for a full, and then just choose to do a full like the last 6 or 7, weeks out. Will it be perfect? No, but a lot of people also, they get, and I think this is like, on the emotional mental side is like, what is your, because you mentioned a little bit about when you were talking, is like, if you know that you can only stay focused for like 100 days, then just know that. Don't pretend that you can stay focused for the whole year.
I gotta accept
plan, right? Yeah, like don't plan the March race in the October race, because really only one of those is going to go well. If you can't keep your attention and you can't stay focused, or do you, and maybe it's not even like you can't, it's just a choice. Like, I just don't want to be that dialed in for that long. I want to be flexible for as long as possible. And don't do an early season race and a late season. Just pick one and be okay with that, or condense them in. Like, if you're a person who has a hard time being that, being that dialed into training and structure and, being told what to do and training peaks and like all these different things, like, then don't set yourself up for failure by having a race in April, having a race in June, having a race in August, and then trying to do a full in October. That's on you. Like, you set that calendar, you set yourself up for failure. If you find yourself wanting to rebel or getting burnt out, like, then don't do it. And I think like that's me. Like, I really want to do Ironman Wisconsin next year. But I'm training for this. I'm training for Dallas. I'm like, man, like this 7.3 training is so easy to fit into my schedule. Like, it just fits perfectly. It's the right amount. It's exciting. I feel like I'm improving. It feels right about there, but then I'm also thinking, well, again, one, don't make decisions that are so far away right now, but also like the fitter you get for a 70.3, could I be, in a good spot to where I could make it through Ironman training for like 6 or 7 weeks? I'm like, well, yeah, you could. And I think that's why I hate people making their A race like their countdown clock like 302 days in advance.
Come on, you used to do that.
That's a long. I know I did. I used to drink 6 bottles of vodka a week too, but I don't do that anymore. So it's like, why? Why?
Well, yeah, that's the whole point, right?
Right. It's like, why do all those things? And so like, look at your calendar and figure out what's going to work best in your life, and then also be okay if you know that these things aren't going to fall in line, and try different things and plan accordingly. But, I honestly think like for this day and age, most people do better without a plan. And I know it might sound like sacrilegious for a coach, but it doesn't mean you still don't coach them the same. You coach them to get better. I've got athletes who have raced once in like the last 3 years, and they're the fittest they've ever been. They don't love the pressure of a race. And so it doesn't, I'm not, okay, well, sorry, Tim, we're just going to do base phase until you know of a race for the next 4 years. No, you train them to get better and fitter every time you go through a cycle. And if something's working, you keep doing it. If it changes, you change it. You're not go, whoa. Same thing going back to like the periodized blocks and all those kind of things. Like, if you're no longer seeing adaptation in like, a certain, in threshold training, you're just stuck and you're like, coach, I feel like I'm stuck, like I'm stale. I don't know what to do. I'm like, sorry, Tim, we have 4.5 more weeks of this threshold cycle. We're going to see it through. Then we will transition to the race specific peak phase. No, you fucking change the stimulus. That's like, again, like I don't know why it seems to be like rocket science and why so many people are so hung up on traditional periodization and how it works, but you just work from block to block and that's how you get people better. And it might end up looking like, 4 weeks of base training, 6 to 8 weeks of VO2 work, back to base training, then some big gear work, then back to VO2, then threshold, then race. You have no idea what it's going to look like or what a person's going to respond to. If they're like a high level responder, they respond really, really easy to certain types of training, then you do that, and then you do the certain types that they respond to easily. If they don't respond to something, then why keep giving it to them? And I just think there's got to be so much more fluidity and flexibility and from coaches too, like when it comes to training. That's why I get so annoyed sometimes. I guess not annoyed, but like you pick up an athlete and they've been working off like, a pre-bought training plan or like an 80-20 or a My Pro coach, and you're looking at it and you're like, no wonder you get stale. No wonder, none of it takes into account like your availability or when things. It's a great outline, but that's about all it is. It's a great outline for about 3 people out of every 3,000. You just gotta go with the flow and what you feel. And like this even goes back to like what you feel like your body, needs at the time. It does need more aerobic work, then do that. Does it need more, threshold work? Do you feel like it's not close near? It's too close to your, to your VO2. You need more separation. Then go raise your ceiling. But sticking yourself into a concrete timeline of base build peak. I don't understand the logic behind it. I know it creates, again, stability and comfort, which is something that most triathletes crave. They crave structure and routine and things like that, but it doesn't mean it's making you better. It's like you have to be. I think you have to be open. That's why I think it's hard to be a really great athlete, because you have to be both focused and open all at the same time. You have to be focused on what you're doing, the task at hand, the purpose that's been presented in front of you. You can't not think it's working, but then you have to be open-minded enough to realize, all right, I've been dialed in, this has felt good, but I feel like I'm not seeing the gain that I need to see. I need to be open-minded to shift my focus to something else. It's not about being distracted, right? It's not about wanting to change things up every week, or all of a sudden, you do one thing like, oh, this is the bee's knees. This is what I got to do for the rest of my time. This is it. You got to be focused and then open to changing focus. Again, it's not attention span issue. It's not being distracted. It's about being open, being an open-minded, both athlete and both coach, to think through, what do I need to get better each time? And then also, like, to be totally frank, like, you can't obsess about zones 24/7. Like, I find it exhausting as an athlete to be obsessed about sticking to the exact zone all the time and what you think might be the best thing for you. Like, and again, that's why I think a lot of times, like, listening to your body, that's what you do. Like, I did that this morning on like my long run. I left the house at 5:30 and I was like, all right, I'm just going to head out and stick around my aerobic heart rate for 5 miles, and then I'm going to bring it home in 4 at whatever I feel like would be the effort I wanted to put out, in Dow. So it's more of like a negative split run. So I looked at heart rate, pretty consistently for the first 5 miles, and then I put my jacket sleeve over my watch and didn't look again until I got done. And I wasn't concerned about, how polarized my session was going to be. I was just trying to do a session I thought would be a good building block for a race that I know that I'm doing. And I think that's something that I think happens more and more and more. If you talk to elite level coaches, is they just do everything based on demand. Like, what is the requirement going to be to excel and do well in this race? And you just look to improve your ability to perform at that race for the requirements, whether it's a cold race or a hot race, or it's no different, right? You're preparing for the day. If it's a cold race, you don't prepare for cold. Like if you're doing Dallas swimming, you better be comfortable swimming in cold water, because I guarantee you it's going to be really fucking cold. Like it's going to be real cold. You prepare for that, but you might not change, and differ up your training for it. And from like a physiological standpoint, you wouldn't want to train for a hilly race to do Dallas, because Dallas is flat. But so we spend a lot of time in certain areas of training and racing of making it, what we think quote unquote is specific from a demand standpoint. I got to heat prep. I got to cold prep. I got to, consume more carbs. It's like, but, demands are demands. And I think if people are more open to that and not so, obsessed with, how their graphs look in Training Peaks and how things look here and there, and they can't have any effort or intensity sprinkled in this zone. There's a lot, I think if most coaches would tell you, and even high level athletes, there's a lot more flexibility and like not randomness, but sporadicness in the focus of what they're doing. And there's no exact thing, just like there's no, the zone model is no finite in, it's the colors of a rainbow, right? They're all blended together. There is no finite, number every day you train that starts here and ends there. That's why, a lot of the top pro athletes, like they measure their lactate, because it's different each and every day. But also for like the people that measure lactate, like half of them, at least their age groupers, have no idea what they're doing, because they also don't understand that lactate in its level is determined by, like, are you testing it in a fasted state? Are you testing it after a high carb breakfast? Like all that changes the level and the baseline in which you're starting at. So again, like there's, this is more of a brain dump for your happy Thursday, but it is, it's like, these are all the things that I welcome to Coach Robbie's mind on a Thursday in December. And this is basically what I think about all day, every day. It's interesting to me, the exactness that we try to obsess about when life is so random and chaotic, and we don't think that training should at least respond to that and prepare us for that.
Well, you said something in there that it triggered a memory for me, and one of our
was the memory when we started the podcast 7 hours ago.
It was Mike Riley welcomed us, but it was you were talking about your run and how you said, I'm going to make this run feel appropriate for what I'm going to be racing, or, kind of something that would lend itself towards the actual race. And it reminded me back to, actually, I think it was one of our more popular little series in the podcast, the micro goals. We did micro goals for running, bike, and swim. And the way I remember it, and I could be wrong, but it's sort of like this, racing isn't really in a vacuum, right? It's sort of like if you're out there and you're actually kind of running and thinking about the goal and what needs to happen on race day, you're actually working on that. It's that little thing specifically that's moving you towards race performance. And I just think back, because it really, when we lived in Nashville, and I had tons of hills around, and I would always just kind of, I'd have a ride, whatever it was supposed to be or whatever. But a lot of times I just went out there and just did hill repeats on the bike or something like that, because I knew I'm racing Wisconsin. So it wasn't like I was looking for an overall performance of that said workout necessarily, but I really wanted to dial in and work on things that made sense for what I was going to be doing. And you can kind of tell, it's sort of like a gut reaction when you're doing something that is going to translate specifically to what you're trying to do. And those kind of things were always huge for me. And like a lot of times if I was, and I mentioned this before a couple of times, but one of my big things was out, maybe on a long run, I would just go, really do the hill thing again. And it wasn't really about pace or anything like that. I was just kind of getting out and just, let's go find as many hills as possible, and then run them hard up and recover and kind of get back into a groove. But a lot of times what would happen, instead of just running, all on a flat greenway or something like that, I would go bust these hills and just like shred myself. And then I'd come back the last mile or two, and I would kind of be hurting, but I would sort of in my head go back to, how it's going to feel at Ironman and try to recreate that association as much as possible. And think to myself, all right, you got a mile and a half to the finish line. How are you going to handle this? Because you can never remember exactly how that feels in an Ironman, but there's certainly little micro ways of training those feelings. And I think that's kind of what you were saying in a way, is that I just want to go out and kind of feel this sort of race vibe in my mind and in my body. And even if it's not like the whole thing, but it's just sort of like little trickles of those feelings that you're going to have, and then how you're going to handle it, or how you're going to mentally deal with it or physically deal with it, and just work on these little things. There's so many opportunities for that just in normal training. But I think it just fits well into what you're saying is about, kind of being focused but open. It's like you have an overall focus, but you just have there's little things you can just work. We talk about working on weaknesses, and it's like, I feel like if somebody has a weakness, they'll think, well, I need to go out and really work on my left-hand pull or whatever in a swim. And they just do that. But you can do it all the time, and it can be within the flow of the workout. And I just think that, we have a tendency to think that we have to do drills and repeat drills over and over and over to lock something in. But most people don't have the patience or, focus to do that kind of thing, but it's always there within the workouts.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also like a pretty huge, because listen, everyone, whether they believe it or not, or will admit it or not, has a goal. And so I think doing stuff like that is a great reality check. How close or how far?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Am I from wanting to hold a realistic pace of this at this event that's at this date? Because the whole thing is about feel. So I was like, all right, this is about, I've done enough 7.3s. It's been a hot minute since the dip. And I was like, I know this is generally the feel of what I feel like on a 70.3. So let me just head out at this, and we'll do 4 miles at the end and just kind of see what that feels like. And, I was in and around the area that I thought I would be in, and so it was both it wasn't neither exciting or disappointing. It was just that's kind of what I feel like now. It's like, right, can I extend that? But now that I'm on the right track, but conversely, I was doing, I did that same thing last week on the bike. All right, I want to hold this for, the 70.3. Let me see how many reps of this duration I can do at it with minimal rest. And then it's it doesn't have to be overly complicated. If you want to average, if you're an athlete, maybe a top tier age group, female athlete, and you're like, hey, I want to do, I want to average 185, 195 watts in my 70.3, so all right, we'll go out and do, maybe do 4 times 20 on 5 minutes rest and see if you can hold that. All right. If you can't, then, you need to shorten those out and see how long you can hold it. And then it's all right. Well, now if you can, let's say you can do it for 4 times 20, then, and maybe now we do 4 times 8 or 4 times 12 at 210, right? So it's higher, you're just getting the feel for that. There's so, again, that's going back to the demands of what you want to do. And that's also just, you have to be realistic about it, because that's how you have to think. Most athletes just throw a timeout. Hey, I really want to appear. I really want to do, break this, the 5-hour mark at this race. Okay. Well, that's going to require this, right? It's going to require a 37-minute swim. Right now we swim 43. It's going to take a 2:28 bike split. Right now you're at 2:40. And then on the run, it's going to take a 8:07, half marathon. And right now you're at, 8:50. So that means on the swim, we need to go from averaging, a 148 on your hundreds, threshold down to low 130s. On the bike, we need to raise your, 60-minute power to, 205 from 180. And then on your run, we need to make sure we're doing, 1K repeats. If you want to average 807 on probably 726 to 740. That's what's required. And then a lot of times, like if you tell them that, they're like, "Oh, that's I'm gonna have to make jumps in like all three." You're like, "Yeah, like we're not saying it's not possible, but that's what the demands are going to be required." Because everyone just looks at a time, like, "Oh, like I can." You scroll through, Iron Track, and you look at you find, or you use Tri-Calc, but you find an approximated, some random person who did the same event, and you find like their splits. And you're like, "That's what I want." And you're like, well, first of all, you can't even tell me why you want it. You're just picking, Jim Everly from, Idaho that did Wisconsin, and you just all of a sudden want his time. You never tell me why. But people do that shit all the time.
Yeah, we do.
And you're like, yeah, exactly. You're like, what? You didn't even know why you want it. I had an athlete a couple months ago was like, "Hey, my friend did top 5 in her age group at this event. Now I want to do it." I'm like, "No, you don't. No, you don't. You just think you want it because you think it's awesome that they did it and now you want it, but you don't want it." And that's not like being harsh. It's just saying, like, if it comes up because someone else did it, it's probably not going to stick. It's probably not an intrinsic motivation that's going to stick. It's external, like you're like grasping for straws here. Like you're swinging at the piñata and hoping Reese's come out, but really you're swinging at it and you're going to get black licorice. Like this is not going to happen. But when you peel it back, you're like, this is what's required to hit that, which is why coaches, like when athletes ask, like, "Hey, what do you think I'm going to do time-wise?" And you're like, "I'm not telling you," right? Because I think that's a bad strategy. But if I tell people who I'm with at the race event, I'm like, I guarantee they're going to fall within like this range because I know in training what they've done that are going to meet the demands of what total. And so if you're looking at again, I think it's another good exercise for athletes to do instead of just, having 17 IPAs and blindfold and you're throwing darts at the Ironman board thinking, "Oh, I want to do these 3 races and I want to get these 5 results." Like, okay, that's great. Now here's what's required to get those results. And again, like I'm all for shooting for the stars, but if you've only seen like a 3 to 4% improvement each and every year with consistent training, don't expect a 20% jump to get you from a 549 to a 457, in a 70.3. Like that's just not how it works. And it's not how it works if you're coming back from like time off. Like that's something I'm having to be very objective about with myself. I'm like, yes, am I a 430 at 7.3 guy? Yep, I got 5 or 6 of them. And am I going to do a 430 at Dallas 7.3? Probably not. But I still got that mindset that I can, so I just have to be very careful in my training that I don't chase a number that is way too beyond me and that I overtrain and spend too much time doing a certain type of intensity because I want that so bad. You still got to think, oh, I could want it to be a stepping stone and like how I get better throughout the year. But look at that. Don't look at the times, think of like what's required to do that, not from like a predictor standpoint, but, ask a coach or someone who's done like, "Hey, what were your splits? What are your splits in training?" "Oh, you want to swim a sub 30 minute, 70.3 time? Well, then you're 100, if you're doing a 2400 race prep set on 15 seconds rest, you better be doing those in like the 115s. That's just the reality of the demand. And so like, think of stuff like that when, you're blindfolded swinging at that piñata, or get your IPAs and you're doing some axe throwing over the holidays. Like think about those things before you make a plan that you're really going to be bought into.
Yeah, what I just thought about when you're saying that is it's kind of easy to want a race goal, but it's hard to want what's required. And if you think about it, that's really where it kind of boils down to, is it's like you got to really want to do what's required to get your race goal. Because, that's where the satisfaction comes in. Is like I was reading something. I've been doing some deep breathing stuff. So I've been like watching some stuff on that. And one of the, foremost deep breathing experts for the last 50 years or whatever said, yeah, it's easy for people to breathe air, but it's difficult for people to breathe energy. And it's sort of like this interesting dynamic for me is like if you think about oxygen as energy, then you're really kind of like genuinely in the process of breathing versus just kind of like going through the motions. And I think that can translate into, getting down to that 115 or 130 or whatever you're trying to swim. I mean, that you have to want that before you can really want the race result. You know what I mean? So it's just sort of like really, I mean, it's kind of all that, you know, like you said, process is overused, but it's really about investing and being bought in on the process and, you know, breaking down those micro goals to give you the overall goal.
Yeah. I mean, we can close out here. We're already going into OT, baby. But I described it this way. Another athlete last week was like, it's, you know, your big goal or big event, like an Ironman or a 7.3 is a lot like the moment when you find out you're going to have a kid to the time that it's born. The time, like when you hear that you're going to have a baby, maybe for the first time, you're so pumped. Every minute after that, you're pretty fucking nervous. You got tests, you got appointments, you want everything to go well. You're worried, you know, the next test results can be weird. You got these ultrasounds, what's going to go wrong? Like, then you got to figure out the baby's sex, and like, then you got to go to all these, you know, classes, and you got these baby showers, and then the lead up to the birth is exciting, but also super stressful because it's a pretty big event. And then you have the baby, and you're like, like, now the joy is back again. Like, there's definitely a lot of stress that comes with it, but that's how it is. People sign up for the race, and then they're super pumped about it. They got the registration, they got the QR code, they're ready to go. I'm pumped. Here we go, baby. Then you wake up the next day and you're like, fuck, it's -2 outside. I got to go run.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it'll be a B race.
Yeah,
you know,
I'll start tomorrow.
It's like, yeah, the momentum is always at its peak when you hit the registration button and drop 800. You know, it's not like when you're just finding time to make these decisions of, you know, what's going to be, you know, what's going to get me better. And again, like, that's why it's also super important to just not have a timeline and even just not have a plan. You know, it's like, it's just feeling it out and what is the best thing for you that day. I mean, what are you laughing at?
I was just it made me think of something funny from our past. But.
Or were you terrified I was going to go on to like another 95-minute?
No. But you're so right, because it is that signing up for that race, and it brought me back to the time we used to have parties at my house before every, you know, you kind of got your shit together. Right. And we would the whole party agenda would be to get people to sign up for Ironman after some beers.
And we would get everyone as intoxicated as possible, and then peer pressure everyone into signing up and do it for a race.
Oh man, what a fun time that was.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just be clear, that was at least like what, 13?
Yeah, it was a long
14
time
years ago. Yeah, man, it's sober for 12. So yeah, it's gotta be at least
Let's just go down there and do it. All right.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you get people, you know, people that are coming in the house that don't even know what triathlon is. They're like, yeah, I think I'll do the double this year.
Oh man,
story those walls could tell.
Yeah.
Oof.
Jesus.
The horror story is probably right. Yeah. So, but no, all that to say, listen, like, you know, I know I've rambled a lot today, so apologies for that. But yeah, I mean, most people think about it, you know, and that's what, as a coach and athlete, like, you're constantly thinking about all those things. Hopefully you're able to grab a golden nugget or a half of one, at least from today. I feel like there was a lot.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm gonna put all that into AI and have them make a spreadsheet.
Spit out a structured outline.
Yeah. What the hell did you just say?
Exactly. You know, just call it, you know, freaking, you know, Coach Robbie's brain dump for Thursday. It's just like all these things that you think about, and, you know, most people don't say them, but it is like, that's my, that's my brain dump for today. I appreciate you all, you know, coming along for it. As always, we love you guys and we appreciate you. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike, he is available. Mike at c26triathlon.com. If you need anything from me, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right, man. Have a good long ride this weekend.
I'll try, man. See you, dude.
All right, see you.